Okay, that's fine now. Thank you. So I said that amongst all the philosophers and the legal experts, I will try to actually express the opinions of the Israeli public. They don't always know how to form or to express their opinions, but I think that the opinions are really important because the representatives of the Israeli public are the ones who should form the policies, and we want to actually maintain Israel's security and interest. This poll we conducted, Professor Camille Fuchs analyzed the findings, and my colleagues, Noach Splelfob, actually analyzed the findings with me. These findings are divided into three levels. The first level is what the public thinks about our situations, whether the IDF is a moral force. That's the first level. The second level is the question what we would like to be, to what extent do we want to be moral, and to what extent do you think that moral considerations should be on our agenda. And the third level is the level of action. How do we actually bring such considerations related to ethics and interest? How do we actually use them in practice when we face all sorts of dilemmas that force us to find a balance? So let me start with the topic of this conference. So I will start with it, although it belongs with the third level already. It relates to action. And we asked about reality today, after the Russian invasion into the Ukraine. And I'm not going to read the questions themselves because I believe that most of the participants know how to read. But we asked about something which is really similar to the policy, to Israel's policy. And as you can see, on the whole, there was a willingness amongst Jewish public in Israel. There was a strong feeling that the Israeli policy, which is a policy that tries in a way to actually help Ukraine on the one hand as much as possible without actually upset Russia too much. That's the policy that most Israeli public is interested in. 56% thinks that it's the right policy. There are 17% who think that they were willing to condemn Russia more seriously and to help Ukraine. Perhaps they were willing to take a greater risk, but on the whole, the level of risk that Israelis are willing to take in light of this war that broke in Europe is not a very high level of risk. So when we divide or classify these opinions, these positions, according to ideological, political division from right and left, and you need to remember that this division is not equal. Right and left in Israel are not the same size. They are not blocks of the same size. 60% is considered right side, so we need to take it into account. And left is not really left, it's left center. Less than 20% of Jewish population. They're not comparable, these blocks, but we can see a significant tendency amongst the left wing to choose something which we can call the more moral approach versus the right wingers who chooses the position which is more based on interest or more practical, you name it. So here, let's move. Again, we're skipping back to the first layer, self-evaluation of Israeli citizens. And I have to say that to some, maybe it's a bit funny, but this is who we are. We have a good opinion of ourselves. Basically, we think that we are moral people, that our state is a moral state. When we look in the mirror, this is what we see, this is what we think. 65% of Jews in Israel believe that we are more moral than other countries in the world, and a little less than 20% make do with similar level of morality compared to other countries. We are just like the others. And only 16% of Jews in Israel believe that Israel is less moral than other countries in the world, when 6% say that Israel is completely immoral. Now, when we take a look at this division, this distribution according to left and right, which is the right division, I'll tell you why. So we see that, in fact, the only group where there is a majority who believes that Israel is not a moral state is the group of those who define themselves as left-wingers. It's a small group, between 5 to 7% of Jews in Israel. In all other groups, Israel is perceived as a state which is on the whole very moral, highly moral, or like other countries. But the only group that says we are less moral than the rest of the world is this small minority group of Israeli Jews who define themselves as left-wingers. Now, when we ask about the IDF and we ask whether IDF is the most moral army in the world, do you think that it's correct, incorrect? Almost 3 Jews out of 4 believe that this statement is correct, is highly correct, or correct, and a minority says that it's incorrect or very incorrect, about a quarter of the Jews in Israel. So here is the same question divided by left and right. On the whole, 72% believe that this statement is correct, and the only group with a majority of people thinking that this statement is not correct, is incorrect, is the group of those who define themselves as left-wingers. From center to the right, there is a majority, a growing majority of people. There's a difference between center, right, and right, but growing majority of people who believe that this statement is correct. And IDF is not only a moral army, it's the most moral army in the world. I'm not getting into the question whether there is fierce competition here or not. Yesterday, someone told me it's a competition, that Israel is the only competitor. And I think that this is also a way to look at it, to look at this reality. So then we asked a question which is a bit more sophisticated and relates to matters of actions and outcome. So we asked what happens when IDF actually starts an operation which is not that controversial. If you support this operation, what should be the objective of the IDF? To fight in order to win, no matter how, to fight and to avoid hurting innocent people, not to harm innocent people, even if it means that you don't win, or to avoid harming innocent people, even if it means that you are defeated. So you see the results here. You see the two possibilities where we are willing to pay a price in order to not to harm innocent people. And a majority of participants, 80% of all Jews in Israel, are not willing to pay any price to harm innocent people. They don't want they don't want to harm innocent people, but they're not willing to give up on victory because of it. So we do not want to harm any innocent people, but once we propose this option of less decisive victory or loss, the percentage of Jews in Israel who are willing to pay such a price is very, very low. When here you see the distribution again between left and right according to the same parameters. When the IDF starts an operation, you see that amongst the left wing there is a quite high rate of people who are willing to pay a price, meaning not only to try to make an effort, but actually to make an effort, even if it means less decisive victory or even defeat. And with other groups, they prefer victory over not harming innocent people. So this is the question. The question, when we show these two extremes, and we can argue whether these two extremes actually exist in reality, interests versus values. It's a question whether they contradict each other, because interest can be part of values. But when we pose this dichotomy between morality and interest and ask people how should Israel behave, or how should Israeli policy be formed, and we offer several options, we can see that the rate of people who see morality as an exclusive consideration, the rate of these people is very low, and the people who think that interest should be the main exclusive consideration is higher, 13%. So in fact, the three groups in the middle are groups of participants who actually want to find some kind of a balance between interests and morality. When in the middle, in the center, there is a group that says that both extremes are equally important, and then there are two other groups, almost equal in size, 31 and 30%. They say, so we need to be very moral unless it severely infringes our interests. But obviously, if we propose this option, most people do not want to choose between two extremes. They want to find an answer for this. They want to find a balance between these two extremes, and not. They don't want to be forced to choose one over the other. And we will see it when we present cases. Imaginary cases of dilemmas, realistic dilemmas. So this is this distribution, morality versus interests, based on left wing and right wing. When we made this division, one of the questions that bothered us was the question whether what differentiate between the respondents have to do with ideology, left or right, or the scale that is related to level of to religion, because we know that politics and religion in Israel are very much mixed, and sometimes you cannot differentiate between the two. So that's why we started to clarify the question of whether what makes the right wingers to insist on their interests and the left wingers to insist on morality. Is it because of politics, ideology, or is it because of religion? So this is why we posed this option. We took only secular respondents, and we actually divided them according to ideology. And here you can see, when we only consider secular participants, we had many, over 1,000 participants, so we could afford asking this question again, asking only the secular people. So again, when Professor Fuchs looked at the findings, he said that the gap derives mainly from the ideology and less because of being a religious. So again, we see the same distribution, the same division. Clearly, the right wingers in Israel tend to speak the language of interest, and left wingers in Israel tend to speak about moral. So this is another interesting division, and it relates directly to to what this institute is trying to do as the Jewish People Policy Institute. So we ask whether the respondents, when they gave the answer, what motivates their answers? The fact that Israel is a Jewish state. So we said, the fact that Israel is a Jewish state, does it affect you in the context of morality versus policy? And then we cross the answers to this question with the answers to the former question, morality vis-a-vis interest. And again, the graph is a bit complicated, but you can still see the scale. And the scale says the following: the more people consider themselves, the more being a Jew is important to them, then they tend to prefer interests rather than morality. If you want to think about a title, a superficial title, the more Jewish people are, the more they tend to cling to interests rather than to morality. I don't know whether we like these findings or not, but this is what we got when we use tools, when we use the tools we used. So another question we examined had to do with the lessons from the Holocaust. And again, the lessons from the Holocaust are very, very present in Israeli agenda. And it's really present in terms of morality and interest. So what we asked here was about the connection between lessons from the Holocaust and Israel's foreign affairs policy. And we actually suggested 3 options, and he got disconnected, the speaker. Please tell him to turn on the microphone. I can't hear him. I can't hear the speaker. I'm sorry. We forced the respondents to choose between the options. You see a majority here that says that nothing should be at the expense of Israel's security. I'm sorry, I can't hear the speaker. I apologize. We're having a technical problem here. We'll be right back. You may be able to find all these examples, examples on the website, on the Institute's website. Here we talk about selling arms or espionage software to an Arab country. They know they might use it against civilians. So again, we can see that in fact choosing the Israelis' choice is very dominant, compromise, to sell the software, but to sell it in a way that will limit its usage so that we'll feel sure that it's not going to use against civilians. But a third of the subjects say we shouldn't sell this software under the circumstances. This is a scenario that actually is similar to what happened to Israel with Poland about a year ago. It's a European friendly state. They actually legislated a law related to Holocaust survivors' properties. What do we do with the relationship? Do we convey the message that we won't tolerate that, or would we be willing to compromise? So you can see a significant majority of Israelis who prefer not to infringe the relationship with that state, and the Israeli Minister of Foreign Affairs was not to do that. He was willing to actually infringe the relationship, but here you see that the Israeli public is not interested in cutting ties with these states because of a law related to Holocaust survivors. And here we speak about a situation when a country moves from a state of democracy and becomes a dictatorship. How should Israel react in such a situation. Most Israelis wanted to chill the relationship a little bit, not to sell security equipment. So to find some kind of a in-between option, we will maintain our interest, we will continue to the relationship, but we want to add some moral element here. That's the choice made by most Israelis. Thank you very much.